Okay, good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me well. I think we can get started with this EU webinar. So welcome everybody to the European webinar Stories of EU Citizens and Freedom of Movement, which is organized as part of the Erasmus Plus project Format Play, so Freedom of Movement at Play, European Citizens' Identity and Transnational Discourses. So as you may know, okay, we are quite familiar with everybody. So this project was funded by the European Union and brings together university from France, Spain and Italy in a shared effort to study, discuss and share what freedom of movement means in today's Europe. So actually we're reaching the end of this project. So today is a kind of occasion to share some key findings. Still, the outcomes of the project will be also officially presented at the European Parliament just in 2 days' time. So in a gathering that will bring together more than 50 personalities from academia, political science, economics, so some personalities of the European Union. So the aim of this project was basically to explore and promote freedom of movement as a fundamental right, and by analyzing experiences of European citizens who experienced freedom of movement in order to counterbalance basically hate speech against migrants and against EU citizens from other EU countries. So I don't want to spoil too much. However, this is not just a research project, but it goes well beyond research because it seeks to promote the values of the European citizenship by sharing stories and developing innovative pedagogical materials and approaches. And so today's programs actually reflects this broad vision, the broad vision of this project. So we will learn about the format play corpus and the social media campaign it inspired, explore how data can be transformed into educational tools. We will listen about migration and media literacy, teaching EU values in digital environment, and finally, the format play teaching and learning materials will be presented in a hands-on workshop. So I just want to take a moment from this opening because, as we know, freedom of movement lies at the very core of the European Union, and sometimes it is taken for granted. However, beyond our borders, as we are witnessing the genocide in Gaza, the fundamental rights of living freely, in safety, dignity are being brutally denied. So we as Europeans, so since the European pillars of peace, equality, respect for the human rights are key to the European Union, this should guide us not only within Europe, but also how to engage the world beyond the European freedom, the European borders. So I'll stop with this because I don't want to steal any more time. So I'll leave the floor to Tyne and Katherine Russo for as they're going to tell us a bit more about this project. So I think Katherine, you're the first. So the floor is yours. So thank you, everybody.
Good morning, everybody. I'm delighted to be here this morning for this webinar, and happy to see your colleagues from the Format Play project and other involved participants as well. So as Arianna already mentioned, the overall aim of the project was to raise awareness of EU freedom of movement by collecting 100 stories from mobile EU citizens. And so we focused on also on the stories they told us and on everyday experiences of freedom of movement. As you will see later, these were the basis for the development of some guidelines to analyze our corpus and also pedagogical materials and social media campaign that was very, very successful, as well as an exhibition in Perpignan. So it's been really, really incredible what we have achieved so far. So most of all, as far as the research, part of the project was concerned, we achieved an incredible goal in creating this corpus of 100 stories by mobile subjects. But what I think the takeaway message and the lesson we learned was that, as one of the participants reminded us, freedom of movement is not just about policies or treaties, but about the lived experiences of individuals navigating opportunities, borders, and identities in everyday life. There is a danger in telling just one single story of EU freedom of movement, as ultimately freedom of movement is not experienced equally, but remains context dependent and shaped by multiple intersecting factors. Our research findings showed that while FOM is highly valued, its meaning and accessibility are uneven. Narratives vary significantly depending on participants' age, gender, language, and country of origin. So some of our participants in Italy, in the south of Italy, also said that it's a freedom of movement is a dream, but also a restricted dream. And so we adopted a constructivist view of borders as dynamic, symbolic, and shaped by discourse, social practices, and institutional decisions. That is to say, we also focus on how people talk about borders, and these are very present in the corpus. People think about borders and describe borders, imagine borders, and but also describe the very real effects of borders. So belonging to Europe is negotiated through the experience of these borders, but also through a membership that is symbolic. So it could be a border that is not only the bureaucratic or institutional border, but a symbolic border like language, the experience of borders in language, in culture, and so on. And indeed, this is very true for some of our participants, especially from Eastern Europe. And I'm happy to say that in Southern Italy was often viewed as a place of solidarity, where local cultural openness coexists, though, with very, fixed bureaucratic barriers sometimes. And so another point that I wanted to raise maybe for discussion later is that as interviewers, we influence, the stories that people tell. So we should take that into consideration. So that is, what I wanted to say this morning. And so thank you all for being here. And indeed, thank you to all those that have chosen to take some time to listen to what we have achieved so far in this project. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Katherine. And I don't know if Harry wants to say something about it.
Yep. Can I just share this? Can people all see my screen?
Yeah.
So I'm just going to mention briefly a lot of contextualization has been given. That's really good from partners. I just want to talk about the French data and contextualize the French data and some of the sort of the initial findings, some of which resonate obviously with other findings in other places, which is normal, which is all part of it. I just want to come back on something that hasn't yet been touched on, and I think it's something that impacts the whole of what we stand for and what we're doing today. And that's if we go back to the beginnings, it's the field work. It's actually going out and talking to people, finding 30 people in each country to talk to. I think we mustn't forget the fact that the sample of people that were recorded is obviously not representative in the sense that there are not sort of specific survey points spread across the country. We haven't taken certain percentages in terms of age and all this sort of thing. So that's quite important just to bear in mind that what was really our way into all of this, it was very much a sort of a qualitative approach. What we were interested is, who are people who want to tell us their story, and let's have a look at these stories. So I think it's very important to just turn the situation around. That we're not trying to sort of get some sort of snapshot of sort of everything that's said by everybody at one particular time. We're actually interested in people with stories. Now that ties in with the whole rationale of looking at stories, and what we're going to do today is we're going to look at how these stories can actually feed into the types of things we want to do to make our data available and to apply it to teaching situations. So stories are very important, and people who want to tell stories, people who do tell stories, are basically doing what people have always done. That's what people do. They tell stories. And looking at narratives is looking at people's stories, and behind stories there are people. So we get this slightly cyclical. And here we have, I just put this image up because I quite like it. This was an early exhibition we had in Perpignan, where we just see the faces of the people that were interviewed within Perpignan. Now, in terms of some of the findings, that I won't go back on what Katherine has said about these things. That's all, we find very similar types of things. What I would just pick up on is just to couch what we're saying within sort of wider issues. One thing that we do pick up on is the idea of transnational practices. Once a transnational, forever a transnational is something that's actually quite clear. So whatever the difficulties, whatever the hurdles, the obstacles, there is actually quite a lot of, even when people really find things very tough, actually dealing with bureaucracy and all sort of thing, there's actually a lot of positive that still comes out of here. And the transnational aspect is actually quite a strong aspect. So transnational is basically, the circulation of people, goods, ideas, and whatever over and beyond and across borders and boundaries. So that's something that's actually very interesting, because this idea of initiation and upkeep of transnational practices is something that we pick up on a lot. And in Perpignan, in one of the exhibits we actually had an artist who worked, who's also a colleague, with us to try and portray some of this transnationalism using different art forms. Another final thing, I think it'd be the last thing I want to say about the French data and how it sort of feeds into the wider project. There's something that I was talking about it last night to friends and colleagues in the town of Figueras, which is just the other side of the border from where I am, just in northern Catalonia, in northern Spain. And we were talking about just what mobility and using language, because that's obviously what happens when we are mobile within Europe, going from different areas to other areas where different languages are spoken, was that there's a whole discourse of empathy, which is quite strong in our data, and which is very interesting. In other words, having undergone life-changing situations, sometimes traumatic, sometimes exciting, sometimes frightening, sometimes a bit stressful, all these things generally push it. I'm going to exaggerate a little bit because I think it's okay to exaggerate today, but it somehow people are becoming nicer people in a funny sort of way. There's a lot of empathy out there, and there's a lot of otherness considerations which can be picked up in people's stories, which I think is very interesting. This sort of attention just to what to how that people fit in, how their lives are fitting in to where they are in relation to others. So that's what I wanted to say. And obviously we're going to be looking at some of the applications, getting the data to actually sort of into classrooms and see how teachers can actually work with some of these findings that we've come up with. So yeah, that's what I wanted to say.
Yeah, thank you, Henry. Thank you, Katherine, for your opening and for setting and framing today's discussion